Hello everyone, this is Peter and I am your instructor for Agile Project Management course Module 2. And today we are going to cover another interesting topic, that is user story. So since we have started working on started on the session for Agile, we are hearing this word again and again, what user stories are. And in this session, we are going to learn about user story because they are the important element of any agile method that you're going to use, be it Scrum, be it XP, be it FDD, anything that you're going to implement, you are going to use the word user story. You are going to use the user story, in fact, and and on the basis of these user story, that how we can write a user story, what are the important elements that are involved in the user story, and how an effective user story can help us to achieve the product increment. So we are going to find the answer of this question in this session. So let's get going. So the first thing that comes to our mind is that what is a user story? So user story is a tool um, used in the agile software development to capture a description of a software feature from an end user perspective. So a user story describe the type of user, what they want and why they want it. And the user story help to create a simplified description of a requirement. And if we go further, it describes the user story are composed of three aspects. One is the written description of the story used for planning and as a reminder. Um, Conversation about the story that serve to flesh out the details of the story, and tests that convey and document details that can be used to determine when the user story is going to complete. So basically, if I say it in a layman language, a user story contains three important elements which describe what the user story is, which describe what conversation about the story is going to happen, and which describe how we can test and convey the document detail that can be used to determine when the story is going to complete. So when we go further, we will see the detail about the user story. The, before we go further, there is an important question which says that who write the user story? Can anyone write the user story? Say suppose if we are implementing Scrum in our project, and if we ask this question to ourselves, that who is the one who can write the user story? Uh, if we go with the perspective of the Mike Cohen, or if you go with the perspective of what have been implemented, though I allow everyone, anyone can write the user story, but it's the product owner responsibility to make sure a product backlog of agile user story exists. But that does not mean the product owner is the one who writes them. So over the course of a good agile project, you should expect to have user story example written by each team member. And also note that you write the user story is far less important than who is involved in the discussion of it. So as far as writing the user story is concerned, anyone can write the user story. But the important factor is that when the user story is being groomed, when the user story is being discussed, all the stakeholders should be present, and specifically product owner and the development team. And when I say development team, under development team, there are QA, there are development team, or they are maybe the architect or the other system engineering person who are involved in writing the user story. So, so that is the important question, and generally it is a myth that only the product owner is the one who write the user story, but even team can help the product owner to write the user story. Now the question comes is that why we want a user story. Why not something else? Why? Because we already have certain requirement documentation that are with us. Why we need to write the user story? So the first and foremost question comes before we go further, that how we can write a user story. So the requirement always change as a team and customer learn more about the system as the project uh, progresses. But it is not exactly realistic to expect project team to work off the static requirement list and then deliver functional software month later. So with user story approach, we replace big upfront design with a just enough approach. So it says that the user story reduce the time spent on writing exhaustive documentation by emphasizing customer-centric conversation. So consequently, what happened is that user story allow team to deliver quality software more quickly, which is what customer prefer. And there are quite a few benefits for adopting the user story approach in the agile development, such as the simple and consistent format saves time when capturing and prioritizing requirement while remaining versatile enough to be used on large and small feature alike, and keep yourself expressing business value by delivering a product that the client really needs. You can avoid introducing detail too early that would prevent design options and inappropriately lock developer into one solution. You can avoid the appearance of false completeness and the clarity. You can get a small enough chunk that invite negotiation and movement in the backlog. You can leave the technical function to the architect, developer, testers, and so on. So the story should be from the viewpoint of the user, not yourself. Not yourself. When I say not yourself, you should not think as a developer, project manager, or any other role which you are following, but it should be written by keeping into consideration the end user viewpoint. And it should describe the feature, event, or the piece of functionality in the simple language. And you should finish it with a reason for a story, for example, the value it creates or the purpose of the feature to the business. If if we go further, there is let's see first the card and conversation discussion, because a user story has primarily three components, and each of which begin with the letter C. So it is sometimes also known as three C's, which is card, conversation, and confirmation. And this terminology, that is three C's, is given by John Jeffrey. So this is the important format of the user story. What you say as a user, I want something to happen so that there is some reason. So it is divided into three parts. So before we covered the card, conversation, and confirmation, let's quickly see what does it mean. So it means that as a type of user, what kind of user you are, you want to implement some features so that for some reason. But the important point here is that the first part is the who is going to do it. The second part is what we are going to build, and the third part is why we are going to build it, means what value we are going to add to the customer with this implementation. So before we go further, let's try to understand card, conversation, and confirmation. The first thing is the card. So what is the card represent? So card represent 2 to 3 sentences that used to describe the intent of the story that can be considered as an invitation to the conversation. So the card serve as a memorable token which summarize intent and represent a more detailed requirement whose details remain to be determined. So you don't have to have all the product backlog item written out perfectly upfront before you bring them to the team. So it acknowledge that the customer and the team will be discovering the underlying business system needed as they are working on it. So this discovery occurs through conversation and collaboration around the user story. So the card usually follow the format similar to what we have seen is that as a rule of the product, I can can do action so that I can obtain some benefit on the value. So the written text, the invitation to the conversation must address the uh, who role, what action, and by benefit to the story. So generally, there is a specific size of the card. It should not be more than certain inches, 3 or 4 inches, so that there is only ample space in which you can write a single sentence rather than describing the complete detail about the user story. So, for example, as a salesperson, I want to enter into the application so that I can order my favorite food. So now this is the only way to write the user story. And when that card is being used to write this user story, it should cover this much of detail, not more than that. So it should not be A4 size paper, or it should not be more than that paper. It should be a certain 3 to 4 inch card which you use to describe what user story says to us. The second comes is the conversation. So conversation, because you have written a card, and on that card there is one liner that is written, 2 or 3 sentences that has been written, which invoke the conversation. So the conversation represent a discussion between the target user, team, product owner, and other stakeholders, which is necessary to determine the more detailed behavior required to implement the intent. So in other words, the card also represent a promise for a conversation about the intent. So the collaborative conversation that is facilitated by the product owner, which involves all stakeholder and the team. So the conversation is where the real value of the story lies, and the written card should be adjusted to reflect the current shared understanding of this conversation. So this conversation is mostly verbal, but most often supported by the documentation, and is ideally automated test of the various sort, that is acceptance test. So once there is a card and there is a conversation, then the third part comes is the confirmation, and the confirmation represent the acceptance test, which is how the customer or product owner will confirm that the story has been implemented to their satisfaction. So in other words, confirmation represent the condition of satisfaction, which we will discuss in detail in the subsequent slide, that will be applied to determine whether or not the story fulfill the intent, as well as the more detailed requirement. So the product owner must confirm that the story is complete before it can be considered done. So the team and the product owners check the doneness of each story in the light of the team current definition of done. So so what happened is that a specific acceptance criteria that is written from the current definition of done can be established for individual stories. So, but the current criteria must be well understood and agreed to be by the team. So, all associated acceptance tests should be written in the passing state. So now you have a physical card. In that card, whatever is written that invoke the conversation, and once the conversation is concluded, there should be some condition of satisfaction which says that how it should be written. So for example, as a user, I want something to happen so that for some reason. So if we come here, we see that as a user, and this is the who part, who are we building this for, and who is the user for which we are building this product. I want some feature, and this is the what part. So what are we building, and what is the intention of what we are building, and because we are building for this person who will come here, that will also define the intent, that why we are building it, so that there should be some value associated with the what we are doing. And in most of the cases which I have seen in my transformation experience, that most of the product owner don't define this value, or the team does not understand by why they are building this product, or by why they are building this story. They don't understand the value, and they understand the value only on their or with their own perspective. So for example, if they say that they are testing the system with 1,000 concurrent user, right? So that the performance of the system should be good. Performance of the system in terms of user perspective is what? Performance of the system is when the user enter into the system, he should not feel that there is a lag in entering the system, or there is a there is a no that some sort of disturbance that happen when the user logging into system, or he or she need to wait for certain amount of time before entering into the system. So it should be written in terms of the end customer. It should not be written in terms of your own perspective. I understand that there are few requirements that can be written there. For example, a technical backlog that can be written in terms of user story as well. So where the team can be described, because at that time when team describe their own technical backlog, so the who will change. So for example, as a development team member, we want this performance to be in this way, so that our system should not shut down when there is a more than expected load on the system. So so the important point is we who is the person, for example, who we are building for this, and who is the user. What part says that what are we building, and what is the intention of building it, so that why we are building it, and what is the value to the customer. See an example of a user story here. It says that as this is what who part, internet banking customer. So this is who. I want to see the rolling balance of for my everyday account, and this is what it want. And so that, and this is the why section, that I can keep a track of my spending each transaction is applied. After each transaction is applied. Or or in another way, if we see in terms of administrator, as the administrator, I want to be able to create other administrators for their certain project, so that I can delegate the task more efficiently. So these are the two examples of user story which describe. And if we further, so so this is the who part, this is a what I want, and this is why I want to do. Similarly, in this case, this is who, this is what, and this is why. So, for example, if I want to write another user story here, I can write as a uh, online learner. I want to have a course which can be attended by sitting at home, so that I can save time of commuting, right? So as a simple story and a simple and straightforward story. So as a online learner, I want this system so that I need not to travel it, or maybe at the online system, I want this system to be effective enough so that it can give me experience of offline training. So, so these are the few things that can be described as a part of the user story. And if we go further, I have taken this sheet from probably Mike Cohen's site, which describe few of the user stories example. So if So if we read this, for example, for a profile section, it says that as a site member, I want to describe myself on my own page in a semi-structured way so that other can learn about me. That is, I can fill in predefined field, but also have a room for free text field or two. So it would be nice to let this free text to be HTML or similar. So for example, as if you read, as a practitioner, as a practitioner, this is the who part. I want my profile page to include additional detail about me. And for example, some of the answer to my practitioner application so that I can showcase my experience into it. As a site member, I can fill out an application to become a certified Scrum trainer so that I can teach CSM and CSPO courses and certify the other. So probably these are the uh, uh, user story example which has been created when the Scrum Alliance or maybe Scrum org or maybe the Mountain Gates site was being prepared. So, so if we go further and if you want to understand more about, say, suppose news, so as a site visitor, I can read current news on the home page so that I say current in the Agile news. As a site visitor, I can access old news that is no longer on the home page so I can access things I remember from the past and that others mention to me. As a site visitor, I can email a news item to the editor so that can be consolidated for so they can be considered for publication. If you go further, if there is another section courses and event on the site, so as a site visitor, I can see a list of all upcoming certification and courses and can page through them if there are lots. So I can choose the best course for me. So these are the few example, and I have attached this sheet with the end of this session, and you can I can mail you or you can download this sheet from the course content. So there are multiple examples in this cheat sheet that have been given in order to uh, in order to get an idea that how the user story can be written in a multiple modules, in a multiple section, at a multiple user part, and so on. So before anytime you can go to the sheet and and read the example of user stories. I'm not going to cover these all the user story at this point of time. So what we will do, we will now move forward, and what I'm going to cover is one important thing um, that Mike Cohen have given. So Mike Cohen is the one who have written uh, various books on agile methodology, and the famous are estimation, user story applied. There are many things, many books that have been written by him. I'm going to cover his one example of which says role, feature, and reason. So and he described this role, feature, reason template, or which is known as RGB, that is role, goal, and benefit, which look like something if you say as a type of user, I want some feature so that something done. So although there are variation, these short sentences structure keep the focus on the who, what, and why part, right? So So this prevent the product owner from giving the development team too much information about how they should implement a solution. By focusing on the who, what, and why, the development team is empowered to find the best technical solution. So who, what, and why is very, very important. And I always emphasize that this section is even more important. Why we want to do is because we don't understand why, then it is little difficult. So let's try to see the first thing, that is the role who. So the sorry. So the first things come is the role, which is the who part. So the role describe who will benefit from this function. And notice that the role is not simply the user. There are different types of users. So we want the role to be more specific than the user, but describe the type of user that will benefit from the story. So product owner are often tasked with getting in the mind of the user in order to understand what should be the most valuable for them. For example, we want our product for a trainer, or we want it for a student. So there should be some sort of segregation that should exist when we are describing our user story. Um, the the feature part, that is the word part. So the first this step very briefly describe what the user want. So this most closely represent the requirement that you describe in the traditional software development. However, you want to be careful not to be too specific or describe how to write the code, right? So this is just a journal's thing, that what user want, and that will determine eventually. But because when the details that how to write the code will come later, when you when the development team going to do the tasking. But for this particular section, you will just describe what the user want, and the user story should be written from the perspective of the user who will benefit from the function, not from the perspective of the developer who will going to code it. So that is very important section. Don't write this section on the basis of who is going to write the code. So don't use this section. What you are going to do is, important factor is the user who is going to benefit from it. For example, if if you are a student, then you might need a course, might want to search a code on online course site. But as a trainer, you want to search modules for which trainer is required, right? So that depend upon what kind of user you are and what exactly you looking for. And the final section is the reason, that is why. So finally, we want to state why the user want this feature. what value will the user get from it. So this helps the product owner evaluate how to prioritize the user story on the backlog. So if the value or the benefit can't be articulated, it might be something that not necessary. So understanding the value often helps the development team to find the innovative ways to implement the code in order to solve the objective, or the ways that may be different from what the product owner has in mind. So why a trainer want to search for the module for which trainer are required, because so that I can apply for this job, or maybe as a student, so that I can enroll myself into relevant course. So So these are the things which Mike Cohen generally describe the rule, feature, and the reason format, and the things should be written in this way when you are specifically working upon the user story. If we go further and try to understand that what is the life cycle of a user story, so so you can define in a broader term, you can define it into 6 level. One is the pending, then it comes to do, then discussing, developing, confirming, and finish. So when a user story is in a pending state, through the communication between the user and the project team, user stories are found, right? So at this state, the user story have nothing more than a short description of the user need. There is no detailed discussion of the requirement, no system logic, no screen design, and yet, in fact, the only purpose of the user story for now is just for reminding all parties for the future discussion of the user request written in the story card. So it is possible that the user story will be discarded in the future, but in the pending state, it is just a one-liner that what exactly user want. Then it comes to the to-do list, where through the discussion between the different stakeholders, the user story be addressed in the next few weeks are decided and are put into a time box called a sprint, right? And such user story are said to be in the to-do state. No detailed discussion has yet been carried out in this state even. So, so maybe that need to become into planning session. That is the next stage where they goes to the discussion uh, phase. So one is pending to do, and then it comes to the discussion phase. So when the user story are in the discussion state, the end user will communicate to the development team and confirming the requirement, as well as to define the acceptance criteria. And development team will write down the requirement or any decision as conversation note. So so after this discussion, if everything is clear, then it comes to the developing state. And after the requirement are clarified, the development team will design and implement the feature and the user request, and then confirming. So upon the development team has implemented a user story, the user story will be confirmed by the end user, and that generally happen in the sprint demo or the sprint review meeting, where where the end users see that whether on the basis of acceptance criteria, the or the condition of satisfaction, the development team have built the story or not. So once they say that it is done, it the life cycle of the story is finished and it is marked as done and deployed as a part of the product incrementer. So though this is not a very straightforward life cycle, but this is how a story progress over the period of. Next come is the condition of satisfaction, which is generally known as acceptance criteria. So the user stories allow team to have one card on the need, want the value of their customer and another, and on the activities they need to accomplish to provide that value. So the link pairing these two things together is the acceptance criteria. And so we can say that acceptance criteria or the condition of satisfaction provide a detailed scope of the user requirement. They help the team to understand the value of the story and set expectation as to when the team should consider something done. And there is a lot of debate that generally happen with within the team and the product owner when the teams are very new, because they want to write everything, sorry, so they want to write everything in the acceptance criteria. But if you if you see, um, there are a few points that need to be covered in the acceptance criteria, which is to clarify that the team should build before they start work, and to ensure everyone has a common understanding of the problem or need of the customer, to help team members know when the story is complete, to help verify the story via automated tests. And so so for example, if we see an example here in the last section, which says, as a potential conference attendee, I want to be able to register for the conference online so that registration is simple and paperless. So now let me take the example here of so if I write as a potential conference attendee, I want to be able to register for the conference online so that registration is simple and paperless. So if this is the story, now we can see that in this story, there are, as a potential conference attendee, this is the who part. I want to be able to register for the conference online. This is what part, so that registration is simple and paperless. So this is the why part. So we can say that this is a complete user story in itself. Now what we need to do is we need to write the acceptance criteria of this user story. So the acceptance criteria might be the conference attendance form should be there. A say so we can say that attendance form. A user cannot submit a form without filling out the mandatory field, and for example, there should be mandatory field, and without that, the user cannot fill the form. That may be first name, last name, maybe company name. We want his email. We want address. We want what is the position of the person, what is the title, and maybe billing information. So all the details should be captured. So the information from the form is stored in the registration database. There should be protection against spam is working. There should be payment can be made by various debit card, credit card, maybe UPI, or maybe PayPal. And acknowledgement email is sent to the attendee after the submission of the email. So few more can be, for example, what we said is payment by debit card, credit card, or maybe PayPal. And um, and uh, we need one acknowledgement email to be sent to the user when he or she registered. So within this in mind, team should make sure that their acceptance criteria is ticking all of the following boxes. So what they need to see that here this is done, this is done, and this is done. So this will make a complete user story. But always remember that acceptance criteria should not include the code review or done, because that is a part of a definition of done. So the non-blocker or the major issues, performance testing performed, acceptance and functional testing done, because that is what is the um, intended from the user story. So the things that can be a part of the definition of the done, that should not be covered at the part of the user story acceptance. Because and why we need not to cover the code review, non-blocker issues, performance testing, because your acceptance criteria should not include any of the above, because your team should already have a clear understanding of what the definition of done include. For instance, you say that the code review is done, testing is done, development is done, the product owner have reviewed the stories, it is releasable, it should be deployed um, on the demo server and all those things. So if we want to see one example, this is a story card. So this is a simple story card which I have created just for the understanding. For example, if you see here, so you can mention the ID for where ticket is taken, who is the PO, what is the team name, who is doing, what is the sprint number, what is the priority, and you can mention here that as a customer what you want. You want to, sorry, as a customer, what type of customer you are. I want to the requirement. It is a feature, or we are seeking solution of the problem, a summary, or what we are looking for, so that you can mention it. So here you can mention the acceptance criteria of the story. So this make a complete card which describe that what story it is, where it is placed as a story, what you are going to do, and when it is going to go live, and what is the estimation of this user story. Um, Maybe it is a bug or a story, or what, or it is volatile or not, so that you can add more detail as much as you want if you want. But the simple story card is this one, that is as a customer what you want till the time you have written the acceptance criteria. So this is the card section which we were saying, that there are three things, that is a card and a conversation and the confirmation. So so this is the simple story card that created just for the sake of the understanding that how the user story should be written. So, so now we have defined all the major things here. We have defined the condition of the satisfaction. We have defined what the user story is, who is going to write the user story, or what are the guidelines, that is the invest. There is a one question that generally come is that why can't we just write task in as user story, right? So we have seen the hierarchical discussion that there is epic, there are feature, there are user story, and then there are tasks. So it's the good question, because though most team asking this question usually don't understand the value of writing the user story, and the fact that they serve very different purpose to the feature. So so if you are writing a user story, the user story is the what part, and the task is the how part. So so the question here come is, so one is user story, and another one is the task. So now, why can't we write user story? Sorry. Why can't we write that task? Why we generally need a user story? Because user story is a what part, and the task is the how part. That is the most important, because the user story describes a piece of functionality from the point of view of the user, and it divides feature into the business processes. Whereas this task task, what are the activities we need to perform in order to deliver the outcome. That is this user, in order to deliver this user story, what all things we need to do, and that describe the individual piece of work that need to be done. So say suppose you as a user story, you want to deliver a login module, for example. So in order to do the login module, say suppose these are the two text boxes. One is a button. This is always the favorite example. Go to the database, verify the user, and display the landing page. Now the task will describe that you need to form two text boxes and one button, connection to the database. You need to prepare a landing page, and so on. So the major difference, the fact it is easy to get buried in the contextless feature developing cycle. The objective become more about clearing your own your way through the laundry list of the backlog, and then it is also building solution that add value to your customer, your human customer, and the user stories bring the context and perspective into the development cycle. So if we go further, we can have few tips to write the user story. But before that, let's cover a checklist, sort of checklist, that what is the good user story checklist is. So so first one is keep them short. You can keep them simple, right from the perspective of user. Make the value or benefit of the story clear. So we can, in other words, we can say what is the reason for the story. Then we can describe one piece of functionality. If you have to write and break into user story, you can do that. Write stories as a team, and you can also say that user acceptance criteria to show a MVP. User acceptance criteria to show a MVP. You can make this as a checklist, and when you are writing your user story, you can mark them as tick when it is done, or you can you can have it on your planning session where you can um, where you can mark this checklist when you are done with your grooming part, or when your product owner is done with the writing the user story. So there are few tips for writing the user stories, and they're quite good, which say the user comes first. So as the name suggests, the user story described how a customer or user employ the product. So it is told from the user's perspective. So what more user story are particularly helpful to capture the specific functionality, such as searching for a product or making a booking. So the following um, um, because these relationship that exists between the user and the story is important, and And if you can define the relationship between the user and the stories, then you will understand that always the user will come first, and you would be able to write a good user story in that case. Second is the user persona to discover the right stories that we have discussed in the user personas session, that how user personas are important, and the persona goals help you to discover the right stories. So you need to ask yourself that what functionality the product should provide to meet the goal of the persona. And as I explained in my in the previous persona section of the user story, you you can you can you can define a good user persona, so that you can write the user story by keeping the end user into consideration. You can create story collaboratively, which we have seen in the previous slide, that all the team member, product owner, or the stakeholder should write the story. So because they are not a specification but a collaboration tool, and the story should never be handed off to a development team. Instead, they should be embedded in a conversation. The product owner and the team should discuss the user story together, and this allow you to definitely going to capture only a minimum amount of information. It will reduce overhead, and it will accelerate the delivery. So you can take this approach further and write user story collaboratively as the part of your product backlog grooming process, and this leverage the creativity and the knowledge of the team and result in a better user story. So if you can't involve the development team in the user story work, then I think you should consider using another more formal technique to capture the product functionality, such as maybe use cases. You need to involve that, right? And then is come as keep your user story simple and concise. And because writing your stories so that they are easy to understand, keep them simple and concise. You should avoid confusing and ambiguous terms, and use active voice, so that focus on what is important and leave out the rest of the thing. So we have seen various template where we can make it very simple and concise in the previous section, and I have attached one a simple example of user stories that may be provided by the my Cohen, or I think Agile Alliance, or Scrum ORG. The next is start with the epic. So if you have something in mind that need to be built, that definitely is going to be big one. So you can describe it as an epic, that is the topmost thing in the hierarchy of the user story. So it is a big, sketchy, coarse, grand story. So it is typically broken down into the several user story over the period of time, and leveraging the user feedback on the early prototype, and the product increment. So you can think of it as a headline and a placeholder for the more detailed story. So starting with the epic allow you to sketch the product functionality without committing to the detail. And this is particularly helpful for describing new product and the new feature. So it allows you to capture the rough scope, and it buys you time to learn more about how to best address the need of the user. And it's also reduce the time and effort required to integrate the new insight. So if you have many detailed story in the product backlog, then it is often tricky and time consuming to relate the feedback to appropriate item, and it carries the risk of introducing inconsistencies. So one, you start with the epic, you then refine the user story until they are ready. So so that is a good exercise you need to do with the product owner. So keep on breaking the user stories from epic until they are ready, clear, feasible, and testable. So all the development team members should have a shared understanding of the story, meaning the story should not be too big uh, and comfortably fit into a sprint, and there has to be an effective way to determine if the story is done or not. Once the user story are done, you can add acceptance criteria to the user story, and And as you break epic into the smaller story, remember to add acceptance criteria, because acceptance criteria complement the narrative. uh, they allow you to describe the condition that have to be fulfilled so that the story is done. So the criteria enrich the story, they make it testable, and they ensure that the story can be demand or released to the user or the other stakeholder. So as a thumb of rule, um, uh, you can at least write 4 to 5 acceptance criteria that belong to a user story. Use paper card. The next tip says that use have a physical card with you, because we have seen the template here. You can print this template and you can have a physical user story card, because this approach provide a three benefit. One, paper card are cheap and easily to use. Second, they facilitate the collaboration. Even one can take a card and jot down an idea. And third, can be easily grouped on a table or the wall, or check for the consistency or the completeness, and to visualize dependencies. Instead, if you don't want to utilize a card, what you can do is, uh, if you don't want to utilize the card, I would prefer to have the big sticky cards, which generally you have, because these sticky cards are easy to maintain, and easy to um, um, it's easy to maintain, and easy to be removed from the board, scrum board, easy to navigate from one stage to the another stage. So it is good idea to use the paper card, and keep your story visible and accessible. Like I said, if you use the paper card, you can keep them at a place where they are visible. Anyone go and have it will create the transparency and make it obvious when you add too many stories too quickly, or you will start running out of the wall space. So when everything is on the wall, it can give you an idea, a visible indicator, that whether you have taken more stories or whether you have taken less stories, so depending upon the size of the story, obviously. But that become more visible and accessible, and that add transparency to all the stakeholders that are involved into the things. So next is, don't solely rely on the user story. So the point here is that creating a great user experience requires more than the user story, because user stories are helpful to capture the product functionality, but they are not well suited to describe the user journey and the visual design. Therefore, complement user story with other techniques such as story map, workflow diagrams, storyboards, sketches, and the mockup. So additionally, user story are not good capturing technical requirements. So if you need to communicate what an architectural element like the component or the service should do, then write a technical story, or so it is better, and you can add a UML diagram to it as well. So writing user story is worthwhile when you develop software that's likely to be reused. But if you want to quickly create a throwaway prototype or a mock-up to validate an idea, then writing user story may not be necessary. So remember, user story are not about documenting the requirement. They want to enable you to move fast and develop software as quickly as possible, not to impose any overhead on the development team or overhead on other things. Hello everyone, this is Peter, and I'm your instructor for Agile Project Management course module 2. And in this session, we are going to cover another very interesting topic and very useful topic, which is the user story slicing. So you can call it as slicing, splitting, narrowing, thinning, or maybe refining. And what we are going to slice, or what we are going to split, is the user stories. And I hope that you have covered the session for the user story, and because that session is very important to understand the user story slicing. So 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 let's get going to understand that what is the user story slicing, and what does it mean, and why we need to slice the user story. So in simple term, if I say the the slicing or the splitting of the user story means breaking down the stories into smaller parts, because the good stories tend to be small. Stories typically represent at most a few person weeks worth of work, and some teams restrict them to a few percent days of work even. So above this size, and it seems to be too hard to know what is the story scope. So saying it would take me more than a month is often implicitly adds, and I don't understand what all it would entail. So the smaller stories tend to get more accurate estimate. So by the end of this session, what we are going to learn is what are the ways by which we can split the user story, and we will try to understand, sir, why we need to split the user story, and once we split it, how we can get the value to the customer at the end of each story. So the key thoughts that comes behind the user story slicing is that it bringing the big stories into a smaller into a sprint cause a lot of problem. And while we will study the benefit of splitting the user story, if we don't split it, it will cost more it will cost more in the longer run, and we will see why it is going to cost more in the longer run. And another thing is fine slicing of stories allow you to get the feedback and fix mistake faster. So it postpone less valuable work, increase trust, and raise the team spirit, and save time on estimate, better mitigates risk, and improve the performance over the period of time. But the question comes is why we need a user with small stories. So why not just give the team last story, then plan iteration? Why we always asking that if you can slice those stories smaller? So there are many reasons behind it, and let's try to understand few of the reasons, so that before we see the method by which we can split the user story, we would know the answer. We should surely have to know the answer that why we need to have a smaller story. So the first thing is that small story provide the focus and the short horizon of the team. So it is easier to get lost in the details with the larger story, because they definitely is going to have a lot of discussion um, while having a discussion on the stories in the planning meeting. So if they are having a very big story, the surprises may come in the later stage, and which actually create in fact a lot of time to get rid of those surprises. And so when you still have development to test handoff, or before you start doing maybe acceptance test driven development, or maybe TDD test driven development, the smaller stories enable more frequent hands off and allow tester to work on the smaller chunk of code. And a smaller story give you the flexibility to reconfigure and adapt to the new discoveries or the changes. And perhaps the PO discover that an existing story is now irrelevant, and or while coding you discover a surprise. Small stories make it easier to adapt. So if the story is big and PO want to um, discard the story within the sprint, it might be a possibility that if the story span over multiple iteration, there is a lot of capacity that will get wasted based on how much a story has been done and how much story has been left even for the same reason. So so small stories also provide more feedback opportunity, that what we have seen here, because it gave us a possibility to um, get the feedback of the stories, and because small story provide more feedback opportunity at all the levels of system, and more opportunity for the personal satisfaction. So think of a small document rush that happens every time you complete something, right? So if it is small, then it will have more effect, and if it is large, it is going to have it is a span for a small time. You will get multiple you know satisfaction at the end of the each story. And the large story increase the risk that your team will deliver nothing at the end of the um, end of the iteration. And your team has a capacity like a drain pipe, and just like a pipe, the larger the object you try to push through it, the more likely it is that blockage and the bottleneck will occur. So perhaps one person who is tied up in the large story also be the only one person who can complete a key piece of another story. So it is better to have a small stories. And even better is that if two persons simultaneously working on the one story, if the team is very new for the implementation of the scrum, because more story require collaborative effort. And it is better to encourage team to use peer programming or collaboration. And um, and even you can suggest people to work two people for a half a iteration, because any larger anything that is little big in the sprint to be work upon, if two person are working half the iteration on that particular big story, it is quite a possibility that you will give the story in the first half of the sprint to the testers, so that if there is any surprises that comes at the time of the testing, team is going to have ample amount of time to to resolve the defect or the bugs. So so also you can make a guideline in the sprint that no story of 13 pointer maybe should be taken in the sprint. So if it is a 13 pointer story, it have to split either to 8 or maybe to 5 stories, 5 pointer story. But the question again then comes is, okay, fine. We said that, okay, a 13 pointer story can be break down into 5 pointer and the 8 pointer. So does it mean that 8 pointer story is still big for us, or maybe how to at what level we can go to make the story small? So if we are working in a bit size chunks, how do we get any meaningful work done? So how do you slice them so small? So part of the problem is the frequent misunderstanding around the value in this story. So the in the invest principle which we have read earlier, the V stands for value, and many people assume that it equates to the business value or a feature that you can sell for $1. So when we combine user story together, the representation features that customer will pay for, right? But on their own, they are too small for that. If you want to convert every story into the dollar value, so instead value refer to the point of view of the user for whom the story was written in the first place. So hard pass sorry, the hard part is that how you're going to um, slice the stories that we are going to see in later in this section, that how we can slice those user story into our sprint. But let's try to understand few of the reason why user story um, slicing is better. So the first one is the faster feedback. Uh, as we say that the one of the benefit of using agile is that we fail fast and we get the feedback as soon as possible in the project execution. So a team that work with the small stories and finish them in 1 to 3 days can get the feedback from the product owner and stakeholder without waiting till the end of the sprint. So if your definition of done include acceptance tests, that is UAT, then it is very important, because if you have smaller stories, you are going to get the feedback early in the sprint. The second is fast mistake correction, which means that it is important to note that the developer remember the code he has written in the last 24 hours perfectly well. And if during this time he receive any comment from other team member or some issue found, he will be able to correct thing in a very fast way. And if the story is large and and it span in a various other modules within the code, then it become little difficult to identify which area of the code is buggy or from where the defect has been arrived. The next come is the postponing less valuable work, which means that when the stories are probably sliced into a smaller one, the most valuable stories can go to the top and the rest may go to the bottom of the product backlog. So the Scrum team does not waste any time on performing something that has less value from the product owner perspective. And is obviously going to give us a better forecast, because let's assume that the development team has an average velocity of 20 story point per sprint. So they usually work with the big stories of, say, suppose 8 and 13 story point. So there is a big chance that by the end of the sprint only one of these stories will not be finished. Thus the velocity fluctuates greatly from sprint to sprint. So it is better to have small stories, and that, like we said in the previous slide, that it give a personal satisfaction to the team that how much stories they have completed within a sprint. So if the stories are sliced into smaller one, the possibility of achieving multiple stories at the end of the sprint is more when we have sliced the story or split the stories, and the possibility is less that we will achieve multiple stories when the story size is large. So if the development team had a small story, say suppose 3 pointer of each, they are going to have at least 7 stories in the sprint. So let me put it in a, so the point is, say suppose the velocity, sorry, so the velocity of the story is, say suppose the team is 20 story point, and if the team take 13 and 8 stories, 13 story point and 8 story point, the only 2 story if the team take, and if they miss this story in the sprint, then they are going to achieve only 8 story point. But if they suppose each story is 3 pointer story, right? So at least they are going to have 7 stories. So if one part of this story is not achievable, say suppose this one, they are going to achieve all the other part, provided they hold the invest guideline, that is independent, negotiable, valuable, estimable, small, and testable. So they are going to achieve all these things, and only one story, that is 3 pointer story, um, will be left in that case. So here the velocity would be, say suppose 18, and here velocity would be 8. But say suppose in the next sprint, if team is still working in this manner and they achieve the 13 pointer and they left the 8 pointer story, here the velocity will be 8 and 3. In this case again, say suppose team have left one story is 2 pointer here in this case, then 3, 3, 6, 7, 8. If this is the 8 splitting, and this is the splitting of the 2013 splitting, and this is the splitting of 8 story point, it means that only in this case this is not achievable. So still the velocity will be, in this case it comes to be 13, but in this case it will become 18, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, again 18. So the velocity is coming consistent in this case, and there is a difference in the velocity. So if you are slicing the stories in this manner, then it is helpful. So it will help in the better forecast of the story. More trusts, which means that the development team which stably finishes on average the same number of stories from sprint to sprint becomes more predictable for the product owner and the stakeholder, and this helps in establish an atmosphere of trust and better spirit. Why? Because finishing 6 to 10 user story in a sprint strengthen the development team spirit, and because people like the feeling of accomplishment. Think about it, which are your favorite football matches that those that end with a score of 0-0 or with a score of 3-2. So the point is that as a human, we need a sense of accomplishment when we are doing something, and that is the reason there are reward and recognition. But in order to make that sense of accomplishment, if you have smaller user story, there is a better possibility that you will get that sense easily than the having a larger story. So saving the time on estimation, yes, because when you split more stories, if the development teams deliver, say, suppose 8 to 10 stories during a sprint, it is very likely that those are approximately equal in the size. And this means that over time, the development team will not have to estimate each story individually, just calculate the number of them, right? So that actually help in saving the time of the estimation. So the next come is the risk mitigation, because better slicing means the more detailed analysis of the item. Thus, a big chance that the development team identified and mitigate risk that otherwise would have surfaced in the upcoming sprint. So, as they say, being forewarned is being forearmed. So, so it is helping you in mitigation of the risk, because if the user story size is small, there is a much possibility, and I have seen it during the transformation. I would not say they will take less time in identifying this in doing the planning in the initial date, but in the longer run, this time reduce of the planning if they are doing it at a very granular level. But but ultimately, what happened is that my most of the project are successful when there is a good granular analysis to split the user story has been done. If it is not done, then it will create problem. So better distribution of work within the train. I often meet the development team that get overloaded at the end of each sprint, and this problem is very complex. But a finer slicing of the stories is one of the way of dealing with it. So smaller stories in a sprint lead to a better parallelization of the work, and the development team performance usually improve, right? So so it is better um, to distribute the workload in the sprint when we have smaller chunk of stories of same size that has been split within a sprint. So these are the few reasons which are very helpful in understanding that why should we go for smaller stories, and why should we split the user stories into smaller stories. So the next is breaking of the user story. There are many multiple method that has been introduced so far now to break down the user stories, but these are the few methods which I wanted to cover, and this has been taken from one of the site which is very popular, and I have given the link at the end of the this slide. You can see that, and if you want, you can go and read the details as well. But we are going to cover this the same article in the sense to understand that why how we can break the user story. There is another concept which is very popular and important, that there are two types of slicing that exist. Let me cover it in a sketchbook so that you can understand. So there are two ways of slicing. So one is vertical slicing, and one is horizontal slicing. So say suppose this is a piece of cake. So there are two ways to slice this cake now, right? So different color. There are two ways to slice this cake. So one is the vertical slicing, right? So one piece. This is another piece. So 1, 2, 3. 4. So when you take this slice out, it will look like something. Yes, right. So in this manner, you can do a vertical slicing. The horizontal slicing is, if say suppose this is cherry, you slice 1, you slice 2, and you slice 3 here. So this is the horizontal slicing. So now if I ask you one question, which one is better, vertical slicing or horizontal slicing? And though it depend upon how what we want to achieve in this is cake example, right? So obviously this vertical slicing is more beneficial. Why this vertical slicing more beneficial? Because all the things is a multi-layer cake. We are going to get all the thing in one slice. But in case of horizontal slicing, if this is the first part, this is the second part, and this is the third part, we are going to get, say suppose, um, all the cream and the cherry in one part, maybe the second layer in the second part, and third layer in the third part. So nobody going to like this, but everyone is going to like this. This same thing happened with the stories. So broadly speaking, there are two approaches which we are sharing, that horizontal and vertical, right? So individual items do not result in working, right? Demonstrable software, because suppose that a team work on an order process for a web shop in a sprint. If they would split up the user story horizontally, they would end up with the work of design, database, maybe front end and testing. Although the item are certainly smaller, they don't deliver working software on their own, right? But after all, a new bit of functionality can't go live when only the UI is finished, or when only the database was modified, or it was also a bad idea to go live without sufficient testing. So individual items do not result in working the stable software, and by extension the business value. So only the combination of all the work generate business value, but only if all the tasks are completed. And this is often a problem. And at the next at, so this is the problem if we go with the horizontal slicing. And another example is that it increased the bottleneck, because instead of reducing the bottleneck, horizontal slicing increase the bottleneck. Why? Because horizontal breakdown is often accomplished by silo thinking. So every member is taken from one of the silos required for software development. So the design guy will take care of the design, the database guy will take the care of the database setup, the developer write the code, and tester does the testing. So if the team member are not interchangeable, there is a good chance for the bottleneck. So if the design guy can't get his work done on time, this will impact the tasks that follow the design, because team member can't help each other out. Every delay, problem or interruption will impact the entire sprint. And the another reason is that if we do the horizontal slicing, it cannot be prioritized, because how can a product owner prioritize a backlog if it consists of horizontal slice? Because none of the item deliver business value or working software on their own. A product owner will be unable to prioritize the work. So this is a good chance that the slicing will be fairly technical, or which create you know distance and misunderstanding between the product owner and the team. Though the horizontal slice breakdown of the user story will result in the smaller item, in severely limit of ability of a team to deliver the working software, right? So and work around bottleneck and the prioritized work. So the three things that is going to create problem in case of horizontal slicing is: one, the prioritization cannot happen; second, um, it will create bottleneck, and it will also increase the risks of the failure within the sprint. So it is not a good idea to do the horizontal slicing. It is always better to have vertical slicing in place. So that is the reason in Scrum a vertical breakdown is more useful, in which user stories are broken down into the smaller user story. So if user story are broken down vertically, they are broken down in such a way that the smaller item still result in working demonstrable software, and the functionality will not be split across technical layers or tasks, but across the functional layer. And so if the user story is, for example, as a customer, I can pay for my orders, so I can get my product. So it can be broken down into smaller user story, like as a customer I want to pay by wire transfer so I can get my product, or as a customer I can pay with a credit card so I can get my product. So the metaphor will further clarify the difference. Imagining, for example, we have seen the slicing of the cake, which says that in horizontal slicing, cream, fruit, and cake are the three different things. In horizontal slicing, we will get the cake and the fruit and the cream in a different layer, but in vertical slicing, we are going to get the in all the layer. So that is going to help us. So we need to look at the option of doing the vertical slicing, because it is going to remove all these three problems which we are going to get through the horizontal slicing. Though with the horizontal slicing we can also say that we are going to split the user stories into the smaller chunk, right? So let's go to the the various steps in which we can split the user story. I'm going to quickly cover it, and it is very understandable. But if you go at the project level, if you go at the technical level, you are better judged to understand which of the steps that can be followed in order to do the slicing of the user story. So let's start. So first one is breaking down by workflow step. So if the user story involve a workflow of some kind, the item can usually be broken up into individual steps. So for example, take a user story for an order process of a regular workshop. So if we say, so the user story is, for example, as a customer, sorry. So as a customer, I can pay for the goods in my shopping basket so that I receive my product at home. So the story is can be broken down in the workflow step. So as a customer, I can log in my account so that I don't have to re-enter my personal information at a time. The first step of the user story may be login, right? So as a customer, I can review and confirm my order so I can correct mistake before the pay. So which means that order review is the second step. Another might be the customer. As a customer, I can pay for my order with a wire transfer so that I can confirm my order. So the third is payment gateway. As a customer, I can pay for my order with a credit card so that I can confirm my order. So right, payment gateway, and fourth option available in payment gateway, that might be credit card, that might be debit card, that might be PayPal, and the virtual option. So as a customer, I receive a confirmation email with my order, so I have proof of my purchase. So fifth is confirmation. So that confirmation can be by email, by message, or on screen confirmation. So what is happening here is, on the basis of the operational, by breaking this the story down a large story like this, we have improved our understanding of the functionality and our ability to estimate. So it's also be easier for the product owner to prioritize the work. So some step in the workflow may not be important right now and can be moved to the future sprint. And if say suppose we want only first the email confirmation and we want to skip message and on screen confirmation, um, confirmation later stage. So but the story can be break down and this can be taken into the future sprint. So so maybe this will certainly limit the functionality of the web shop, but it does not it does allow a scrum team to review, or maybe even deploy the completed functionality at the end of the sprint, test it and use the feedback to make the necessary changing. So the first step of so this is the first step by which you can take the user story with the help of the workflow. So this is the one method. So another method might be you can split the user story. The second is by business rules. So user story often involve a number of explicit and implicit business rules. So take this, for example, the story where it says that as a customer, so as a customer, I can purchase the goods in my shopping cart, shopping basket, so that I can receive my product at home. So, so what we can do in the business rule, for example, as a shop owner, I can decline orders that is below $10 because they aren't profitable. So one business rule is denial of order. Right. So as a shop owner, I can decline the customer from outside the US because or maybe India, because the shipping expenses make these order not profitable. So there are different conditions. One is it should not be less than $10. Another possibility is that in a specific region. Another might be that as a shop owner, I can reserve order product from stock for 48 hours. So other customers can see the realistic stock. So as a customer owner, or as a sorry, a shop owner, I can automatically cancel order for which I have not received the payment within the 48 hours, so that I can sell them again to the customer. So another is cancel the order in case uh, in case payment is not received within 48 hours, right? So business rules are often implicit, so it will take some skill and analytic awareness to understand them. So it may be helpful to employ another strategy, maybe how is the functionality going to be tested. So there are multiple that we are going to cover later in this, but the point is that on the basis of business rule, you can also divide or split the user stories. So the next come is So we can break down the user story by happy and unhappy flow. Though it seem weird, but yes, there is one way. There is a way by which happy and unhappy user stories can be split. So let's suppose the story, say suppose as a customer, I can log in. So as a customer, I can log in my account so that I can access the secured pages. So functionality often involves a happy flow and unhappy flow. The happy flow describe how functionality behave when everything goes well, and if there are deviation, exception, or other problem, unhappy flows are invoked. So, for example, in this example, where user want to log in into the account so that he or she can access the secured pages. So maybe the happy flow is that as a user I can log in my account, with that I can access the secured pages. So the happy is uh, user is able to log in and can access secured pages. The another way is unhappy is that as user I'm unable to reset my password when the login fails, so I can try to log in again. So the another unhappy is the reset my password when my login failed. Like after 3 attempts. So maybe as a user, I am given the option to register a new account if my login is not known, so I can gain access to the secured pages. Again, an unhappy scenario. There is another unhappy scenario where, for example, as a site owner, I can block user that log in correctly 3 times in a row, so that I can protect the site against the hacker. So again, unhappy flow. So unhappy flow describe the expectation. So by identifying the various flows, we are clearly understand the required functionality. So a product owner can more easily decide what is important right now. So perhaps blocking user after the 3 attempts or the failures is not important right now, because there is only one handful of the user in the very fourth person anyway. So perhaps the reset of the password can be done by sending an email to the customer care employee for the time being. Again, by splitting up functionality, we can more accurately ask question about the business value and make the decision accordingly, right? So, so if we go further to the strategy number 4, is the breaking down by input option or platform. So, so most web application have to support the various input option and the platform like desktop, tablet, mobile phone, or the touch screen. So it may be beneficial to break down large item by their input option. So for example, as a let's take an example here. So the story is, as a team member, I can view the Scrum board, so I know how we are doing as a team. So so we have following input option. So as a team member, I can view the Scrum board on my desktop, so I know the status of this or the status of the sprint. So the first option, input option, is mobile, right? So the another option is desktop. So I want to, as a member, I can view the Scrum board on my desktop, so I know the status of the sprint. Similarly, I can, as a team member, I can view the Scrum board on my mobile phone, so I know the status of the screen. So another input option is that as a team member, I can view the Scrum board on a touch screen, so I know the status of the sprint. Maybe another option is one is touch screen. And another option is, as a team member, I can view the Scrum board on a printout, so I know the status of the sprint. So another option is printout. So by breaking down the large item this way, the product owner can more easily prioritize which input option or the platform are more important. So a desktop version is likely to be sufficient for now, while a mobile version can be pushed to a future sprint. Or perhaps the printout can be implemented with a simple PDF capture for the time being. So without having to create a version specifically suited for the sprint. So these are the various input options by which you can also split a user story. So if we go further, sorry, strategy 5 says that breaking down by data type or the parameter. So some user stories can be split based on the data type they return or the parameter they are supposed to handle. So for example, if we take example of a user story, so as a customer, I can search for products, so I can view and order them. So there are many ways to search for a product. So all the potential parameter can be considered and broken up into the smaller user story. For example, as a customer, I can search for a product by its product number. So I can quickly find a product that I already know. So one way of searching the product is product number. So another way of searching the product is the price range. So I can write a story that as a customer, I can search for product in a price range so that the search results are more relevant, right? Another option is, as a customer, I can search for product by the color so that the search results are more relevant. So I can use color search. Another option may be, as a customer, I can search for product in a product group so that the search results are more relevant. So search for example, if you go to any grocery site, one option they have is chocolate, one for biscuits, one for maybe soft drink. So this is the segregation they have done on the basis of the data type or the parameter. So by breaking down the search functionality in this manner, we are more clearly understand what kind of search parameter can be used, and this allowed to be more accurately estimate the functionality. But it also allow a product owner to make a decision about priority. So maybe paging is not yet relevant because of the small number of product, or maybe it might become relevant when the number of product grows, or maybe some of the search functionality can be implemented in a simplified manner for now. So another example of this strategy is breaking up the functionality involving the management information based on the returning data types. And some of the information can be presented visually in a chart or the graphs, but can also be displayed in a tabular form for now. So perhaps the product owner is okay with exploring the data to Excel and manually creating all the graphs and charts there for a time being. But at the initial level, you can have these kind of parameter to search to write down the story or to break down the story. So the next strategy is which is breaking down by operation. So user story often involve number of default operation such as create, read, update, or delete. This is CRUD operation, which we generally call. So maybe which we write CRUD. So which says create, read, update, and deleted. And these are the CRUD operation are very prevalent when functionality involves the management of entities such as product, user, or order. So maybe the user story says, so the user story says that as a shop owner, I can manage product in my workshop. So I can update price and product information if it is changed. So by identifying the individual operation that is required for this functionality, we can derive the following smaller bit of functionality. So one is say that as a shop owner, I can add new product so customer can purchase them, right? So that is creation. So first is adding new product, right? So the second thing is that as the shop owner, I can update existing product so that I can make or adjust the changes in the price or the product information. So then the next one is updating the information. So third, maybe a shop owner, as a shop owner, I can delete the product so that I can remove the product that no longer in the stock. So So next is, for example, as a shop owner, I can hide a product so that I can not sold them for a time being, right? So when presented with this strategy, many teams wonders if the smaller item actually deliver business value. After all, what the point of creating entities when you cannot update or delete them afterward? but perhaps the product owner has such a limited number of products that editing or deleting can be done in the database directly. Sometimes an operation can be easily implemented in the simplified form. So deleting the product can be done in two ways. So you can completely drop the record or all the associated record, or you can soft delete a product. So in that case, the product is still in the database, but it is marked as deleted. So sometimes one of these approaches is easier to implement and can be good enough for the time being, right? So if we go further, we have strategy 7. So which says that breaking down by the test scenario or the test cases. So this strategy is useful when it is hard to break down large user story based on functionality alone. In that cases, uh, it, it is it's helped to ask how a piece of functionality is going to be tested. So which scenario have to be checked in order to know if the functionality works. And maybe, for example, if we take a user story, as the manager, I can assign task to employee so they can work on the task. So so the story says that as a manager, I can assign tasks to employee so that they can work on task. So if we consider this functionality based on the potential scenario, we can break down them into, for example, test case 1. So if employee is already assigned, he or she cannot be assigned to the another task. So it is like writing test cases. So one is if already assigned, validate that it is not assigned again. So test case 2, maybe if an employee has reported in sick, he or she should be visually marked. Maybe the test case scenario 3rd is that if an employee has reported in sick, he or she cannot be assigned to a task. So maybe test case 2, if sick, um, cannot be visually marked. Or third, maybe if sick, task cannot be assigned. So maybe the another scenario is if an employee is not yet assigned, they can be assigned to a task. Maybe the other scenario is that employee can be assigned with a touch screen monitor, or these employee can be assigned through mobile. So this strategy actually help you to apply the other strategy implicitly. So by thinking about testing, you automatically end up with a number of business rules, maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe unhappy scenario, or even the input other scenario which we have discussed in the previous workflows. So sometimes test scenario can be very complicated because of the work involved to set up the tests and work through them. But if a test scenario is not very common to begin with, or does not present a high enough risk, a product owner can decide to skip the functionality for the time being and focus on the test scenario that deliver more value to the system. So in other case, a test scenario can be simplified to cover the most urgent issues. Either way, relevant test scenarios can be easily translated into the backlog item and added to the sprint backlog, right? So if we move further, we can have strategy 8, which says by breaking down by rules. So user stories often involve a number of rules or the group that perform the part of that functionality. So we can take a story which says that so the story says, so as a news organization, we can publish new articles on our homepage, so customers have a reason to return periodically. So maybe these stories can define on the basis of rule that as a rule, as a customer, I can read a new article, so I can be informed for important event. So first rule is customer. Maybe the second rule is journalist, because as a journalist, I can write an article, so I can be read by our customer. Maybe third is editor, so that I can review the article before putting it on the site, so that we can prevent typos. So maybe for as a admin, I can remove article from the site so that we can pull offending article. Maybe as a customer, again, I can review and confirm my order so that I can correct mistake before I pay. So these are the few rules that can be implemented, or on the basis of that, user story can be divided. So by breaking down the functionality into the role that we perform bit of that functionality, we more clearly understand what functionality is needed and can be more accurately estimate the work involved. So writing user story is a great way to apply this strategy. It also helps the product owner to prioritize, and some roles may be less relevant at the moment and can be implemented later. Perhaps there is no need at the time for an editor, or editor can be called by a journalist to check the article manually. So maybe another strategy is by breaking down by optimize now versus optimize later. So so often user story can be implemented in varying degree of perfection and optimization of the functionality described. So maybe as a visitor, I can search for hotel in a neighborhood, so I can narrow my search. So a story like this can be broken in a varying degree of optimization. So Let me write the story first. So as a visitor, I can search for hotel in a neighborhood. So I can narrow my search. So for example, as a visitor, I can search for hotel based on within the radius from an address. So I can narrow down my search. As a visitor, I can enter the zip code to autocomplete the address. So I cannot have to enter the entire address manually. Maybe as a visitor, I can use my location that is on the GPS to search the neighborhood. So I don't have to enter the address manually. So as a visitor, I can get the most search hotel in the neighborhood right away, while the other hotel are loading in the background. So I can go quickly and get the result. So maybe some few of the method are pin code search, GPS, maybe another way location, though they are same, but user can add no first of 5 letter or 6 letter, and then the address will come automatically. So So this strategy is not supposed to be used as an excuse to write a crappy code, but now and maybe the better code in the future, because that is ultimately otherwise uh, uh, attract the technical debt. But the Scrum team should always strive to deliver code that is maintainable, tested, and well written. So this strategy is concerned with the functional optimization. So in any case, a product owner can more easily prioritize these items. So perhaps it is sufficient for now to let visitors search by address, maybe and a radius, while more complex functionality by auto completion or GPS can be implemented in the future, right? So that is the strategy by optimize now and optimize later. So maybe we can cover the last strategy, though this is not the last as such. There are many other functionality or many other ways to split the user story. I'm just covering few of them so that you can find another ways of doing it same. So breaking down by browser compatibility. So maybe in a variation of the few strategy that we have discussed, user story of web application often need to work on a wide variety of browser application or platform. So the modern browser tend to be more compliant to standard and easier to develop for, while other older browser often required hack and customization to get everything to work properly. For example, as a customer, I can view product details, so I know if I want to buy it or not. So so by considering the browser version, we can break down the work into smaller item. So the story says, so as a customer, I can view product details so I know if I want to buy it. So maybe we can say that it should not, as a customer, I view product details in IE10 or maybe IE7 or maybe any version after IE7. So I can also say that as a customer, I can view the product detail in Chrome, maybe in mobile iOS mobile Safari browser. So so these are the way by which we can use the compatibility of the browser. So though there are, these are the few method which we are discussing right now. We have discussed 10 method, and I have given you can download a sheet um, at the end of this session where we have mentioned all the work step that we have discussed, that is the workflow steps, happy and unhappy scenario, business rules, input options, data weight and parameter, operations, test cases, role, browser compatibility, and optimizes now versus optimize later. So I prefer now, because you all go back home, and when you go back home after the session, you should take all the stories which you are implementing right now if you're a product owner, and try to see what all uh, operation, what all the better thing that you can do with the user story that you have already written. Go and back and check that whether you have done the vertical slicing of the user story or the horizontal slicing of the user story. If you are a team member, you will decide that it should touch all the architectural layer, starting from the UI to database to architecture level and the backend, everything, so that you can, make sure that these user stories are providing some value at the end of the uh, sprint or at the end of the product increment, right? So, so one last thing before we wind up this session, I would like to iterate again that we should always be asking one simple question every time when we are thinking of writing the user story. So the question is, sorry, what is the simplest always remember that what is the simplest, quickest way to deliver some value to the customer, because is is this is the important question, and in fact this can be revised, which say what is the simplest, quickest way to deliver some value, or uh, or we can say value to a customer as soon as possible, right? And and you should not be writing the user story which says that what is the simplest and quickest way to so you should not be asking this question, right? Well, because when you start working with the development team, they always you know come up with the best possible ways of delivering the story. So the question they ask is, what is the simplest and the quickest way of delivering the user story? But instead we should be asking that what is the simplest, quickest way to deliver some value to the customer, or what is the simplest and quickest way to deliver a value to a customer as soon as possible. But these questions are certainly different in words, but very different in the outcome. So in the former question, we keep us this question because the first question that we have raised to ourselves, give us the customer problem space and where we want to be, what is the customer trying to achieve, and in this way the enabler for them to solve their problem or meet their need. So in order to answer this question, um, we can use help of the slicing and the capabilities, so that so that so that the stories can be divided at the granular level. And when we are dividing the story at the granular level, they are actually delivering some value to the customer. And by doing so, we can use it will be helpful, or it will be indeed helpful or useful to implement the 3C cycle of a story, which is the card, conversation, and confirmation. So it is better to utilize the previous concept which we have discussed in the user story, that is the invest criteria, that that the invest criteria that says independent, negotiable, valuable, testable, small, and which is independent. So these are the few values and the few things that can be used to describe the value to the customer. So so always remember to use the first question or the second question or the third question, that is what is the simplest, quickest way to deliver this story, right? So in this way, we can describe the user story in a better manner, which actually delivers some value at the end of the product increment, or at the end of the sprint. So like I said, please go back, look at your project, look at your stories, and see that whether you have used the vertical slicing or the horizontal slicing. If you are new team, start implementing the vertical slicing and the horizontal slicing, or the vertical slicing, which means the vertical slicing instead of the horizontal slicing. Use these tips and methods to write down your own user stories. Thank you. Is going to write the user stories. And before we further go into the invest part of the user story, which describe that how the user story should be written, but the important point that generally comes is, when are the user stories written? So 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 when I say when are the user story is written, because there are multiple phases that exist within the project life cycle. But when we are going to write the user story, so if we go and see, if I go and see the Scrum structure, so stories are taken from the product backlog. They go to the sprint backlog. Now there is this sprint where inspect and adapt is happening for, say, suppose for 2 weeks, and then the product increment is delivered. So the question is, when, at what stage we are going to write the user story? So so the answer is that user stories are written throughout the agile project lifecycle. So usually a story writing workshop is held nearly the start of the agile project, which is here when the project is being started, and everyone on the team participate with the goal of creating a product backlog that fully describe the functionality to be added over the course of the project, or a 3 to 6 month release cycle within it. So some of these agile user story will undoubtedly be epics. So epic will later be decomposed into smaller stories that fit more readily into the single iteration. that we have seen in a one of the session, that we can describe a hierarchy that epic, features, user story, and then task. So generally task does not come in the form of user story, but this is the section. Feature is further divided into user story, epic is divided into features, and a feature are further divided into user story. Or sometimes some of the people don't consider feature in between, because they consider here theme or initiative before before in the hierarchy of the user story. So the point is that we should keep on writing agile user stories, or sorry, user stories throughout the project. So there is no hard and fast rule that everything have to be written at the very start. It can be written at any interval of user stories, right? So let's see what are the guidelines that has been given to write the user story. So it says that the user story should be independent. That stands for, this is invest is the economic. So I is the independent, N is the negotiable, V is the valuable, and E is estimable. So this is I, that is independent. This is negotiable for N, V for valuable, E for estimable, S for small, and T for testable. So let's try to understand what does it mean. So what does independent means to us? So user stories should be as independent as possible. So when thinking of independence, it is often easier to think of ordered independent. So in other words, stories can be worked on in any order. So why it is this important? Because it allows for the true prioritization of each and every story. So when dependency comes into play, it may not be possible to implement a valuable story without implementing other much less valuable stories. So when we say independent, so there are three user story if they're written um, in a sprint. So there should not be any structure or dependency that exists between these two stories, that A cannot be completed without B, or B cannot be completed without C. So try to make them as much as independent as possible. So then the next come is the negotiable. So the second point is that a story is not a contract. A story is an invitation to a conversation. So the story captures the essence of what is desired. So the actual result need to be the result of collaborative negotiation between the customer uh, and the developer and the tester. So the goal is to meet customer need, not develop something to the letter of the user story if doing so is insufficient. So remember that you can always ask the magic question to help to drive the conversation. So it's more of a negotiable thing than the contract that has been signed, and it required a level of trust so that the development team and product owner, so that development team can suggest or describe to the product owner that why this story is not feasible in this way, or why this story can be broken, so that one part of it can be delivered in this sprint and the another part can be delivered in the another sprint. So next come is the valuable, um, which which uh, which means that if the user story does not have discernible value, it should not be done. Period. Nothing else. So hopefully user stories are being prioritized in the backlog according to the business value. So this should be obvious. So we have seen we are going to see few prioritization techniques later in this section in the next session, but for this session, if you are not prioritizing stories on the basis of business value, then it is not going to create any value when you're going to ship the product at the end of the sprint. So some people say each story should be valuable to the customer or the user. um, it is not in this way, because the business value encompass more than just the customer or user facing value. So it include internal value, which is useful uh, for things which are normally called, for example, non-functional requirement or something similar. So it is preferred to say that story has a value to the user in the user story. In this way, it is clear who is to be satisfied. So finally, remember that so that value clause of the user story, it is there for a reason, and it is the exact value we are trying to deliver by completing the this particular user story. And when I was working with the various teams at a start initial transformation project, this is the hardest part to achieve, because uh, because the development team does not understand what value being associated with the um, user story. So they generally prefer to complete the user story rather than understanding the value of it. But believe me, when you make them understand what is the value of this user story that is associated with it through the help of the product owner, their concentration and focus increase, uh, increase, because now they understand why they are developing this particular user story, or why they are developing this product. So the next come is the estimable, that which mean um, which means that a story has to be able to be estimated or sized, so it can be properly prioritized. And a story with a high value but extremely lengthy development time may not be the highest priority item because of the length of the time to develop it. And what happen if a story cannot be estimated? So you can split the user story and perhaps gain more clarity. So sometimes splitting a story does not help though, but if this situation occur, it may be necessary to do some research about the story first. So please time box the research, because if you're not time boxing the research, it becomes so lengthy that that it will take more than sprint just to research the thing, and they will name it at POC, because they don't understand what to do into it. So if you do not time box the research part, it will take all the available time, thereby depriving the product of something else which could have been done instead. So estimation is the important part here. And and try to make a certain guideline that what is the maximum size you want for a user story. Because if the user story is more than, for example, in my case, for some team, I have kept that user story should not be greater than uh, 5 story point, because the moment it goes to 8 story point, they are not able to complete it. So I made a certain um, sort of rule, you can say, though we don't like it, call it as a rule. But because when the team started working on breaking this user story, if it is more than 5 story point, then they understood that the big chunk of story is difficult to be done within the sprint, and even it add more complexity rather than easiness to do within the sprint. So so we have covered independent, negotiable, valuable, estimable, and small. Though estimable and small go hand in hand, and because the user story are small chunk of work, but how small should they be? So the answer depend on the team and the methodology being used. So 2 week iteration is there, then one user story should not take more than 3-4 days to work in total. And this include all the work to be get the story to be done state. And also remember not to gold plate the user story. You should not be a simplest thing to work. You should do the simplest thing that work, and then stop it. So which says that, because if there are 5 developer, and if you're not prioritizing your story, you're not breaking your stories into smaller section, so what will happen, that if this is your sprint, and if the sprint is for 2 weeks, and there are 10 days in this sprint, you will get all the stories to the tester on the 8th day, and they will pile up on the very last day, and then you say, or the team says that they are not able to complete the user story because they were not able to test the user story. But how will they going to test the story if all the story team member are giving stories to the tester on the 8th day or maybe on the 7th day? So the user story, when I say small, it should be 3 to 4 days. It should cover 3 to 4 days before sorry. So so it should cover 3 to 4 days first. So what will happen is that if there are 5 developers who are working, so there was some story that will come on 3 to 4 days, and another story section will come on maybe 5 to 6 days. So there should be a proper balance of all these story when we are in the planning meeting, or when we are prioritizing our product backlog. So the last section is the testable, and every user story need to be testable in order to be done, because if you are not able to test the stories, or uh, uh, think this way encourage sorry so if you are not able to test the stories within this sprint, what will happen that it will go to the next sprint, carry forward to the next sprint, and the whole sprint will uh, go into a toss, because now the tester have more work to do, and development team will keep on developing the stories. So what will happen at the end of the third sprint, you will find that your developer are going ahead than your testers, and that is going to create a very messy situation within the sprint. So so make sure that your stories are testable in such a manner that they don't have dependency on the other thing to be test. And if the product owner and the team work together to invest in a good user stories, the learning curve of working together will be much shorter. So invest guideline, encourage good habit which eliminates some of the bigger problem of the user stories, like dependencies being too big, hard to test, and so I would prefer to take the time to invest in good stories to see the dramatic change in how effective planning will become. So as well as how productive the team will become with the implementation of invest. And believe me, it works magically when actually team learn to use this guideline of invest, that is the story is independent, it is negotiable, valuable, estimable, small, and testable. And product owner, please remember this by heart, that whenever you are writing this story, it should adhere to all the criteria that are involved into it. And if you are a scrum master, make sure that your team is accepting the stories which is adhering to the investment principle. And if you are a um, development team member, make sure that you are getting the story with the invest guideline, or you are breaking the story in such a manner that they are adhering to the invest. So there are three questions, but I think probably we have covered many of them. But there are three questions I think. Do user stories replace a requirement document? So that is a question that generally come because in traditional software development process, we have a big documentation which describe the requirement document, that is SRS or something we call it at that time. So so in agile project, especially Scrum ones use the product backlog, which is the prioritized list of functionality to be developed in the product or the service. So although product backlog item can be whatever the team desire, user story have emerged as the best and the most popular form of product backlog item. So while a product backlog can be thought as a replacement for the requirement document of a traditional project, it is important to remember that the written part of an agile story, that is, as a user, I want to do things so that some value is incomplete until the discussion about the story occur. So remember the three guidelines: cart, conversation, and confirmation. So it is often best to think of the written part as a pointer to a real requirement, and user story could point to a diagram depicting a workflow, a spreadsheet showing how to perform a calculation, or maybe any other artifact the product owner or the team desire to do that. So, so the second question comes is what user story are not, and obviously user story are not the your big requirement documentation, right? So, uh, so say if I consider a user story as a requirement document, it will not make a sense, because unless you need to cover these um, user story as a part of requirement document, like we said in the previous section, that user stories are not the use cases. So use cases was first introduced by the Jacob Jacobson. So this which is used in the unified process. So a use case is generalized description of a set of interaction between the system and the one or more actor, where an actor is either a user a user or another system. So use case may be written in unstructured text or to conform with the structured template. So 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 a user story is not a use case. So use case and the user story are primarily two different things. So I'm not going into detail of what user use case is, but those of you who have prior experience of writing a use case, you can understand what I'm saying here. So I'm not going to cover the use case in detail in this section. So the next question is NFR as user stories. So NFR stands for non-functional requirement, and Mike Cohen very beautifully explained that non-functional requirement or the constraint are the one or the same thing, because in Scrum there is no other way to describe the constraint. So a good way to call a constraint is a non-functional requirement. So for example, if I want to test my system for 1,000 or maybe 1 lakh concurrent user, I don't want to be cover it as a part of my user story. But on the other hand, it is necessary to test the story for this performance testing. So the question is that can these NFRs, or we can say non-functional requirement, can be covered as a part of user story? I would say yes. That's what Mike Cohen also explained very beautifully in few of the example. I can quote few examples from the Mike Cohen blog. So as a customer, I want to be able to run your product on all the version of Windows from Windows 95 and onward, or maybe Windows 10 onward. Another example he gave is that as a CTO, I want the system to use our existing ordered database rather than creating a new one, so that we don't have more than one database to be maintained. And maybe as someone who speak as a Latin based language, I might want to run your software someday. So these are the few non-functional requirements that can also be covered as a user story part. Probably one more question that can be taken here is that um, how we deal with the defect. So if there is a defect in a system, which sorry, there is a defect in a sprint one, and somehow team is not able to do that, complete that defect, how this defect is being written. So this is a big topic. What I'm going to cover here is I can probably cover this in another short lesson, but defect can be written as a user story, and they can be become a part of the product backlog. So what happen is that if there is a severe defect that will be raised, that will be rewritten as the user story, go to the product backlog, prioritized by the product owner and the team, and then to be taken into the next sprint. So this is all about user story, and I hope that it is clear that how to write a user story. Um, what are the important of the user story, what are the guidelines for the user story, and you can take help from the tips section where there are almost 10 tips which describe how to write a better user story. So if you are a development team, you have now an idea that how to write the user story, even as a product owner and as a scrum master, just um, an eye to look that whether it adhere to the guideline of invest principle. That is, the story is independent, negotiable, estimable, small, testable, and I think that's it, right? So that's all about the user stories section in the Scrum method.